Hi everybody. I wanted to do a little tour of or a virtual tour I should say, of my home network. I've kind of put this together over the last few years. I'm going to go through each of the elements in separate videos, but also I thought it'd be useful because various parts of this will be used to power different projects around the home automation, home security, that kind of thing. So I just put this sketch together of how the network looks at the moment and just thought I'd go through quickly each of the parts. So at the center here at the top, I've got an ASUS router. It's an RT AX88U. I'm ever so pleased with this router. It's fantastic, very flexible. You can do such a lot with it. I've put on Merlin software, which corrects a lot of the bugs that are in there with the default firmware, but also adds a few other features. So that's kind of at the heart of the system. And then I use that to configure and manage everything else. So the connection off to the internet, I recently went with the BT Full Fiber 900 service. So I use their fiber, their modem, and my router. So I'm currently getting about 930 megabits download speed and about 110 up. And then looking at the LAN, so there's a number of elements on the LAN. The router comes with 8 Ethernet ports. So they're all used up. And then I've extended those with 2 switches. I've got a PoE switch, which I'll go into in a bit, and then I've got a straightforward Ethernet switch to open up a few more ports. So just going across the top part of the LAN, on the left here you can see I've got a Blue Iris server. So Blue Iris is some software that I bought. It's basically a security system, and that's an understatement. This thing is incredibly powerful in allowing you to connect a range of cameras and get all sorts of alerts and detections. You can also incorporate AI into the system. So I run that software on an Optiplex PC, which I use as the Blue Iris server. Connected to that, I have a number of security cameras outside of the property, front and back and side, with a few more to come. I run these over Ethernet connections, although I should say, where possible, I connect all devices to my network using Ethernet just because of speed, performance, but also security. So these cameras, when I was kind of refurbing the house, I put a lot of Ethernet cables into places for future use, part of which were for the security cameras. So they have power over Ethernet connections to them. So this PoE switch, which is a Netgear switch that I bought, supplies 50 volts to each of the security cameras. So they've all got their own individual IP addresses, and then they can be managed by the Blue Iris server. I can also connect the Blue Iris server virtually to my Vera Hub over here, which is my smart home controller. So I can use HTTP requests between these two devices to notify various elements around the home. So that's Blue Iris and the security cameras. I should also say that the security cameras I have blocked from having their own access to the internet. The only way I can access these cameras is through the Blue Iris server. That's just to stop these devices from calling home and sharing any information I don't want to be shared with the manufacturer. So next along the line is just a Ethernet switch. Again, this is a Netgear, I think it's a 10-port switch. So I use that to power Ethernet connected devices around the home. So I've got a number of smart TVs, so they all get their own Ethernet connection. I've got a network printer, which also is an Ethernet connection. And I've also put a number of access points in the walls around the house, so you can just connect up temporarily anything that needs an Ethernet connection. Next, I've got a Samba share, so not a true NAS, but this is a SSD which is plugged into a USB 3 port on the back of the router, and then I use the AI disk service or feature within the ASUS router to configure that as a Samba share. You can also do an FTP share, but I've just got it as Samba. So this Samba share can feed photos, videos, movies that I've got stored on there to the connected smart TVs, for example, or other PCs and phones around the home. I should also say that on the Asus router, I've disabled outbound connection to the internet, or inbound, I should say, for devices to connect into it to manage it. I've shut those down, and then I've got a OpenVPN server running on the router, so that if I do want to connect to it remotely, I can do that in a more secure way. So next, running along the top, I've got a bank of Raspberry Pis over here to the right. So I'm a big Raspberry Pi fan, single board computer, uses hardly any power and can sit there happily 24/7, providing various services. So I've got one set up as a Plex server. So Plex, if you don't know, definitely check that out. That's a media-based server for all your home content that packages it up and distributes it in a really nice way. It's got a fantastic web interface. You can also get a app which they make, and it just makes viewing your content in a real nice, smart and easy way. So the Plex server, you can point that at a number of drives that I've got mounted. So one is the Samba share, so there's some content on there, so that can be served up through the Plex interface. I've also, if I just skip one over, I've got a TV head end. So TV head end is a server that takes your terrestrial TV and turns it into an IP-based TV service. So that will then take your terrestrial service and stream that on the network. So that's also got storage connected to it. So that drive can also point to the Plex server. So I can use TV head end to watch TV on any device. So on these smart TVs, I can watch live TV. I can watch them on Wi-Fi connected mobile devices. I can also set up recordings, and then those recordings can be served up to the Plex server, and then the Plex server can serve those up to various screens around the home. I've also got a NEMS server running on another Raspberry Pi. So NEMS is a Nagios Enterprise monitoring system. So this has the sole role of monitoring every single one of these devices on the network and gives me early warning if any of those go down. So absolutely essential part of the network, in my opinion. And then lastly, my last Raspberry Pi is Pi-hole. Pi-hole essentially is DNS and blocks a lot of ads from being served up when you go to various websites. Definitely check that out. Very simple to set up. And as I say, all of these various servers and elements on the network, I'm going to do separate videos telling you more about them and how to set them up. So I mentioned earlier, my house is smart, so I use a Vera smart hub. I've been using Vera for quite a few years. These use Z-Wave technology, so this is a mesh network, and I power lights and sockets and various other things around the home. So you can see over here Z-Wave Plus, so I've got things like light switches, motion sensors, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, locks, and a whole range of devices. So that's absolutely essential. And as I said, actually, I've connected the Vera hub with a number of other devices. So for example, I can use the Vera hub to send a wake up command to the TVs. I can connect that to Alexa, and then with a wake up command, I can switch on TVs and things if I want to. I can also use Blue Iris to use the cameras as motion detectors. So when they sense motion, apart from sending out email alerts with recorded clips to mobile phones, I can also send a HTTP post to Vera to a virtual switch, and that virtual switch will then trigger motion, and then I can get that to turn on lights and all sorts of other things. So quite good that you can connect these devices together. So as I said, mostly everything in the home is Ethernet for speed and security, but obviously you can't get away from Wi-Fi. So laptops, tablets and smartphones are still Wi-Fi connected. I've also got a few Wi-Fi enabled smart devices. So Sonoff makes some really good Wi-Fi devices. If you flash those with some open source firmware like Tasmota, you can then use Tasmota through a community developed app which you can install on Vera, and then you can control that as if it was a Z-Wave device. So that's quite good because Sonoff devices are a fraction of the cost of a Z-Wave device. So I do have some Wi-Fi smart switches, which I've not shown on this diagram, connected around the house as well. So anyway, that's a quick overview of the network. I hadn't realized actually until I put this sketch together just how big the network has grown, and I think it will be growing a lot more in the future. So I've got some plans for outside the house. I want to do some smart irrigation, some smart water sprinklers and lighting. So I'll update this as we go, and of course I'll do videos on each of those devices. Anyway, that's it for my virtual network tour. Hope you like that. Any questions, please post them down in the comment section, or any things you'd like me to go into more detail. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing.